Jonathan Weislow, man, a little technical difficulty, but we are rocking here. So
You got through
this
it.
is awesome. I appreciate you coming on. You just had a second kid a couple days ago, right? Like, what is
Yeah,
this date?
4 days ago, like on
Four
Friday.
days. 4 days ago. Okay.
Yeah, I think I've
Okay.
I've I think I've aggregated like 3 hours of sleep since then, but it's all good stuff, man.
All right. Enough to come on the post game podcast. So thank you.
You got it. Just
So I
expect
was
very little out
saying,
of my vocabulary, in my immediate recollection of events.
fair enough. So the post game podcast, what I was starting to say before we hit record was that I found you because you should I say previously, or you still have a podcast that's out there called the
It,
Post
it
Game Podcast?
it's still out there. I was like the pregame podcast, if you will. So yeah, I had a podcast about the exact same thing called the Post Game Podcast, which, as you know, is about life after playing sports and transferable skill sets and whether it's good or whether it's bad. And I always felt like there was value in that, as you obviously do as well. I was singing your praises just for sticking with it and getting so many episodes out there, because I think this whole game, outside of like quality, like you need to actually have something that's quality and provides value. But outside of that, like, you can have a great product, but if you don't remain consistent with it, it becomes a matter of attrition. So I think a lot of people go through a cost benefit analysis and they're like, yeah, let me spend my time doing something else. Like, is it really worth the time and financial investment? Um, and so that's, you know, I concluded,
That's yep.
hopefully a lot earlier, than you. I hope you keep going with it if it's something that you're passionate about. But I arrived at the conclusion that I'd spend my efforts doing something else
Well,
for
thank you.
now.
Yes, yeah, because I run that cost benefit pretty much on a daily on a daily basis, and whether it's telling me to keep going or not, I'm not sure if that's wise. But I, to your point, I think there's a lot of value in it because this is like something that I experienced and that you experienced too, playing college baseball. Um, Never got the chance to play professionally or anything like that, but I don't think it really matters. It's because, especially at a high level, you played at University of Miami in the ACC, and at some point, one of my dad's buddies says this. He's like, everybody's got an athletic clock. Some of them just run out sooner than, or what's he say? Athletic time, some run out sooner than others. So,
Yeah,
um,
I'm sure he says it more eloquently than the way you just put it,
I hope
but
so.
I
I
agree.
hope so.
It's
Who just had
it's
the Who
it's
just had a
accurate.
kid 3 days ago?
I like
um,
leapt at the opportunity to jump in and correct you. I was like, yes, like I can take the upper hand on this one.
yeah.
Uh,
So, um, yeah, we're working on that with the podcast here, how to speak. But um, you you did the podcast for 19 episodes. I'm curious. Like, so what were you thinking when you started that? Did you want to make it into something greater? Like, what was the thought process there when you
yeah,
got
I
going?
think uh, so. It happened. I think you actually might know better than me. I think I started in 2020, like around COVID, maybe a little bit before then. It might have been 2019. Um, and I think I was just compelled to do something with a higher purpose. And I'm not sure I knew what it was. I didn't have a family yet. Which is a big part of it, right? You have exponentially more time when you don't have a family. And I was doing pretty well in my career. I just felt like I wasn't validated and really wanted to do something with more purpose. And what I felt like drawn to was something that I could identify with, was, being a former athlete. In my line of work, which at the time was exclusively construction and construction management and real estate development, I felt like I approached things differently, which was beneficial to me in my career, but also kind of felt like a fish out of water sometimes, and maybe like a little bit, I wouldn't say self-conscious about it at all. I would say just conscious of it, of the different experiences that I had compared to people that I was interacting with on a daily basis. Um, and I also knew that just because I had still remained in contact with some of my cohort from playing sports, whether it was at the high school level or in college, and a lot of them went to go play pro. Kind of knew that I had landed on my feet, where others hadn't, and others had as well. But I just knew through conversations that I had acquired a certain set of skills, that I didn't realize were benefiting me. And then I got into the conversations with people who had spent a lot of years just playing sports and hadn't really been in the real world, and that we were the same age. I think it was like 32 at the time. By the way, anything that I tell you that's a fact with like a date or like an amount in it or like a statistic is probably 60% correct. So just bear with me. I'm ballparking a lot of this. Um,
Fair enough.
so we were, let's call it early 30s, and I just realized I had accumulated all of this kind of like social and professional currency through being in the workforce for so long. Um, and I've been talking to people who really weren't comfortable kind of outside of that world of sports and didn't know how to parlay that skill set. And I was like, man, there's like, I went through it, I think fortunately, like you, pretty early on in the aftermath of sports. Like I never played professional like you. I could easily create a narrative that, I got injured, and because I got injured, it took away my opportunity to play in the league. Like I was at best going to get drafted as like a mid 30th round pick back when we had 50 rounds. And like, I didn't love it enough. I didn't work hard enough. And for those two reasons, I had some natural physical talent, like I think a lot of it. But for the first two reasons, it was never going to play out for me. So I think something that was very, very fortunate was that I never had the opportunity to play pro because of an injury. I don't feel like something was stolen from me. I think I was able to accelerate my growth in life after sports. So, I feel like I had a story to tell, and it was relatable. And there's a lot of vulnerability that comes along with that in talking about kind of the identity crisis that you go through. And I feel like a lot of stories that athletes hear, or are aware of, are like on two sides of the spectrums. You've got the guys who just ended up being complete failures and never panned out, and got into drugs and alcohol and caught a case or whatever. And then the guys who made a bunch of money, and now they're on ESPN, or they've got a philanthropy that's a great way to to funnel tax-free dollars, and um to get into other ventures as a VC because they've accumulated a great amount of wealth. And you don't really hear the stories in the middle, which are far more common. So I really felt like there needed to be a medium for telling that story.
Absolutely. Yeah, you hear the things on the extremes of the spectrum, but how often do you hear the college athlete that's like, "Hey, man, I just kind of washed, or not, you didn't really wash out. It played out however it was supposed to play, and then you go into a job, into maybe a corporate job or whatever it is, and then that's pretty much it. Outside of maybe getting into golf or playing in a rec league, softball league type of thing like that,
Yeah, like that's a
and
dark
that's
hole too.
yeah, it is. Um, it's fun, but it's a dark hole. So, um, one thing and I went back and listened to the last episode. What was it? I can't recall the
Adrian
name.
Cardenas,
Yes, just
guys,
listened. He was awesome.
literally one of the most, yeah, one of the most intriguing human beings that there is. I mean, he's a special guy, really
Yeah,
special guy.
yeah. But that was one of the things that you were saying, I thought was interesting, was that you weren't even sure if you ever or like loved baseball, but you were just good at it. Is
And
Yeah. What's your
I got to
thought?
tell you, I feel like, first of all, that's true. Um, and I'm sure what I'm telling you is probably regurgitating whatever I said on that episode. Um, but I liked being good at things. It feels good. I think it's human nature to want to do the things that you're good at. And for me, like it was my um, like social credibility to be good at sports. And so like once I remember I was an only child, and neither of my parents particularly social or particularly athletic. Um, and I remember, and it's not like a trauma at all, but I guess to some degree you could categorize it as that. But I just remember initially in my childhood, I felt very like lost and out of place, and like other people had siblings and like groups that they were a part of, and I would just always was like, play with me, play with me. And then I found sports, and I was like, oh, like I see, like the person who's good at sports, people like, and you can use that as a platform for life outside of sports, etc. And then yeah, I just remember I was like, I probably said it in different words, but I was like, I'm going to get really fucking good at sports. And it started with soccer. I was young, I was like 7, and I was really good at soccer. But I also, and again, I don't know. I'm kind of like reverse speculating here, but I don't think I had the physical attributes to be good at soccer. Like was super fast as a sprinter, but my endurance wasn't there, and I know you can build that up. And baseball, I just felt like had this, in American society, had like this whole like aura to it back then. And I had a couple friends that were, started playing baseball, and I'm like, I remember it was the same time I went to the big field in soccer. Like I was good on the little field, and I remember my first game on the big field when I was like 7. I was like out of breath the whole time, and like that day I was like, I want to play baseball. My friends are playing baseball, and I was bad. Um, but I remember the first feedback I got when I like hit a double or something like that. I was like, oh wow. I was like, I want more of this. And so, I hit a point um where I just became very, very good at baseball, and everyone knew that I was really good at baseball, and I held that as my identity. And I was in the gifted programs academically in middle school or in elementary school and then middle school. Um, and, a lot of times those gifted programs are in the public schools that aren't in the best areas and have demographics that are not the best, so there was a lot of gangs and stuff like that. But, so we were like the group of nerdy kids that were picked on, right? It was like me, some other white kids, some Indian kids, a bunch of Asian kids, and, like maybe a couple black kids in the gifted program. And like everybody else was culturally very diverse. Um, like they would pick on us. And then as soon as I got good at sports, like I started getting street cred. I remember that. And I started playing on the travel teams back before AU was such a business. Started playing on the travel teams with a lot of these other kids who were like the cool kids and like the regular groups. And like I liked that a lot. And then we started becoming friends outside of there. And it was just very, very validating. And I think once I hit a point where I became very good, I needed it to really to survive, because without that, I didn't know who I was. And I like out of fear thought that I wouldn't be respected socially if I wasn't great at sports. And so it's just like this perpetual anxiety that I had of not being viewed as an elite performer, that I think actually really helped.
Yeah, because that can help. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because that can help drive your performance, right? It's almost like a fear of not. Yeah, that's not a fear of failure, but like a fear of almost what others would perceive of you if you weren't good at sports. Or yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. Which it's kind of along the lines of the podcast. It's like, you go
Yeah,
through an identity crisis at that point. It's like once you lose like yourself as an athlete and you believe that that's the only light in which people see you, it's like, who are you? And so really the fear of the unknown um, is what kept me going. And then, I also believe you hear certain things a certain way that can have a profound impact on you. And Um, I remember I was trying out. It's actually how I met Adrian Cardenas, who was the last episode on the podcast, formerly known as the Post Game Podcast.
still
And I
known as
was
it, but yeah,
still known, but
still known as just
it
not
gets it
run.
gets buried it gets buried on Spotify. Um, but I remember I was invited to try out for Team USA, and I was like, "What?" It's like I have no business doing this. Like I remember being surprised that I like made varsity. Like that to me was was an accomplishment, just because I didn't have like an immediate frame of reference of anybody close to me who had ever accomplished anything great athletically. Like my dad played like JV basketball, I think. And my mom like ran high school track, and then there was no one that I was close to who had achieved anything spectacular or at a very elite level. So there was like what I saw on television, which like included, like the College World Series to me was like this like spectacle, like this fantasy land, right? Because I never knew anyone who had touched those heights. And then so I remember when I was invited to play for Team USA, I was like, what? Are these guys out of their mind? Like, I'm not that good. Um, and then, I by no means was I one of the better players on the team. Like I would say I was probably one of the less good. Um, and there was some unbelievable talent. I mean, outside of like Adrian, you had like Clayton Kershaw was on the team, like Justin Upton, like a bunch of other major league guys that are just so much respect for, and like idolize those guys then. Um, and then but then you hear people around you like, yeah, you belong here. Like, hey, great work, or I really like how you do that, and they want to learn from you. And then you become, your peers, and you're also mentors to each other, kind of learning. And then you like get into an environment of just like curiosity, and you realize that like elite performers are just always curious, right? And they're just like always trying to get better. And I think just being in rooms like that, where that's the culture, just give you such an advantage in life, because I feel like there's not a lot of other environments outside of sports that cultivate that, and you don't realize how valuable it is when you're in it. And then when I got out of sports, and then I went and I played at University of Miami, which is the same type of culture. And there's obviously some exceptions, right? There's people who don't kind of like abide by that code, but when you're around the people that are the best, they are always just wanting to get better. And then you get into the real world, and like you realize that everyone's not like that. You're like, wait a sec. Like I'm so disappointed. I had this fear of like fitting in. You're like, I don't want to fit in with these people. Nothing wrong with that, but just it's very different. And then you're kind of like, well, who do I like? What groups do I assimilate with? Like, where do I kind of like gravitate towards? Um, and it's a confusing time. So
So, all right. So that's an interesting point, because fitting in, like you said, where do I fit in, or like what groups would I gravitate towards? What's kind of like the line, do you think, between fitting in because you have to, right? I mean, you can't do anything by yourself. You need other people, and branching off and doing your own thing, because you're still a curious guy. You're a creative guy. You've got these other projects you're working on, which we'll
yeah,
maybe get into at some point. But does
yeah,
that make sense? Kind of
definitely
what
get
I
into it.
like. Yeah, kind of like, obviously you
It's
want to be a super high performer, but you need to rely on other people, man. You can't just do your own thing all the time.
Yeah, you know what, man? I listened to this podcast. You listen to Rich Roll at all?
Occasionally, yeah, I
And
have in the
he's
past.
he's the best. So this I just started with an executive coach who's incredible. Like I thought it was gonna be a crock of shit. I was like, I'm not gonna like this, but let me try it out. And he sent me this podcast with Rich Roll and Arthur Brooks, who teaches this course on happiness at Harvard University. And and there's a lot in there, and like I'll just like a lot to unpack. And I was doing it when I was on my run, which I hate running, so I always listen to things that are like deep intellectual dives when I'm the best version of me. A lot of times I just listen to like hip hop music also, so I'm not, I'm very flawed in that. But um, he started talking about um, how we're really not independent people, like as much as we like to think that we're self-made and independent. Like we're not. Like that's bullshit. That's a lie we tell ourselves. We're interdependent, and we have to rely on other people. And when the best way that I found through the years, and you're talking to a 37-year-old version of me, which is very different than a 32-year-old version of me. And I've learned this through like trying to go through it like the me first type of way, even though I didn't see it as that way. um but by being valuable to other people and providing a service to them, like they inherently become valuable to you and grow your social circle. And um, fitting in, I think, is something that happens. Like it's a very naive way of looking at life. To and it's also very natural. Like when we're young, we feel like we need to fit in because we feel like there's like there's us and there's like everyone else has it figured out, whatever it is. So like if we're using sports, you come out of sports and there's this whole world that isn't sports, and they all do things a certain way. Like we make that up. We totally made that up in our head, and I think there's so much power in recognizing that the way that you do things, good, bad, or indifferent, is the way that you do things, right? And learning about how other people may do things, and then taking from that, hey, maybe I want to shift the way I do thing A or thing B and do it that way. And maybe I want to keep the way that I do things. Maybe I want to teach the way that I do things because there's value that way. So I think that by being curious and just constantly like learning how things are done or approached gives us an opportunity to make decisions whether or not we want to shift or teach. Does that make sense?
Does make sense. Yeah. So kind of like being curious. Yeah. Continuing to be curious about just different ways to do things, I guess. Um,
Yeah, and I also think like you were talking about my like other ventures. I think if you do anything at a high level, it gets respect, period, from people who also are able to do things at a high level. So whether it's making a rap album, or whether it's teaching a class, or whether it's baking a cake, or whether it's uh, being a foot model, like I just made that up. But like if they're done at a high level, you'll get respect from other people who have had to put in the work and put in the input to get the output. And I think that, not to say follow your passions, right? But just to do things at a high level that you naturally gravitate towards is very fulfilling. And I think can also be inspiring, not to run away from those things that you naturally gravitate towards because you fear the perception of the public, or you fear the perception of them or they, right? Or whoever the other people are. Like that is a disservice to yourself. And I think just creates this internal kind of struggle and resentment.
mhm. No, man, that definitely. I mean, that's something that I've experienced even with this podcast because I work, I have a full time job. I'm clearly passionate enough about doing this and whatever that mission might be to
Yeah,
continue,
yeah.
or crazy enough to keep doing it. But um, that's been something for me where if anybody listens continuously to these, which I'm not, maybe my mom does, but they've probably heard me say like that's something for me. Like I still don't really broadcast it very much, aside from a few social media channels, But just recently, I've started telling people, like, yeah, I'm doing this podcast about former
Yeah.
athletes who used to play sports. I think there's a space for people, for conversations to be held about how it can help. That's kind of it. Like just kind of short and
But do
sweet,
you
but
feel, when you say you don't broadcast it, do you feel like because you identify as this, whatever your professional career is, and if you step outside of that, it's going to get kind of looked down upon, or the two of them don't necessarily blend, or you're not confident in the product you're putting out? Like, what is it that causes you to
no,
not broadcast it?
I'm that's a good question. So I don't really identify with my day job, quite frankly. So it's almost like the opposite of that. Although that doesn't really answer the question as to why I don't broadcast it, but um I don't know. Yeah, I mean, yeah, why for you? Because you've got, it seems like you're good at what you do professionally, seems like you enjoy it. But then you've got these other creative outlets like
Yeah, I mean, I would
rapping and some
say,
of these things.
no different than like what baseball was to me. Like I enjoy being good at things, and so I'm very good at what I do. I'm so good at it, I really can't do anything else to make the same amount of money at this point, and I recognize that. But do I think I was put on earth to consult on construction and real estate projects? No. And like, I'm also not insanely motivated by money. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, we need it. I appreciate it. I like to spend money on things that gives me security, but I'm not like so money hungry where it just needs to be another deal, another deal, another deal. Like it's not it for me. Um, and so I feel like profession, my current profession in construction consulting has been very good to me. It's afforded me the opportunity to meet some very successful people in a lot of different industries, given me a ton of exposure to some of the best, in the local market, which I think is one of the most interesting um, real estate markets in the country, if not the world, right now. I know how a lot of things, or at least have insight into how a lot of things get done. From the guys that are underwriting the deals and in lending the money, putting together the pro formas, to the construction companies, to the tile guys. Like, I understand kind of like the whole economic kind of cycle of that, and it's great knowledge to have. Um, I also think that I look around, and I said this to somebody the other day. I go to a lot of conferences now. Our company got acquired a couple of years ago, so now I work for this larger corporate entity, and I now go to some of these larger conferences where you've got some hitters in the industry who've been doing this for a very long time, and there are exceptions to this. There are definitely exceptions to what I'm going to say, but I would say by and large, they all wear clothing that's pretty similar, which is different than what I'm comfortable in. Um, Make a ton of money, talk about how much money they make, probably have a boat, drink a good amount of alcohol, play golf, cheat on their wives, um, and are away from their family if they have a family or they don't have a family. Um, and their personal life is not tight, and they don't necessarily engage in higher level conversations outside of transactional relationships, unless there are some other things that I choose to not engage in. And I'm not saying or insinuating in any way that they're better or worse than I am, but I just find that I'm not really morally or ethically, or just like from a lifestyle perspective, aligned with a lot of those people, and that's okay for me, but I also recognize that there's a whole group of people out there that I do really align with, and many of them are outside of my professional industry. And like, particularly, it used to be sports, but I'm not necessarily convinced that it is anymore. I'll go back to the alumni game at University of Miami every year, and I have less and less in common with the people that are there, whether it's the coaches or whether it's the players, because those worlds are just like a vortex, right? Like, if you're going to be good, you don't really have a lot of opportunity to see outside of that. But a lot of people in entertainment, a lot of people in the creative space, in music, um, I really love the way that they think and just the way they see the world. And for so long, I never really engaged with them, and I've had a really, really good time and learned a lot about myself through opening up my social circle.
It's interesting. So now, it's like, what are you feeling now? Are you just feeling like, I mean, aside from tired, because you just had another another baby,
Yeah,
but are you
yeah, I'm
like,
exhausted.
are you feeling like pretty aligned with where you're supposed to be? Because that's when you started the podcast, just a guess, maybe not. You're kind of seeking something. Now you've got a couple balls kind of in the air. You've the Cumming Group. You've been doing some of the rapping. You were adjunct professor, but now that it's culminated to really where we're having this conversation, you just had your second child. Are you
Yeah, I
feeling
mean,
like, all right, yeah,
I, I just know about myself. I like to do things. I approach things differently than most people do, and like, it's probably not better. Like, I approach things differently, right? There's definitely more efficient ways of doing things in the way I do them, but I've realized that by taking an eclectic approach and bringing different groups together, you can create some very unique opportunities and experiences, and that to me is really what I'm focused on right now. You know, I remember I was interviewing DJ Khaled, and DJ Khaled said to me, that's a guy, like, you look in his eyes, and like, if he wasn't Khaled, you would be like, this guy is out of his mind. But he is, and he has accomplished a lot of things that are ludicrous, and he will continue to accomplish things that ordinarily would be ludicrous. And he believes every word that comes out of his mind. or out of his mouth, or both. And he's just so he's like got such a conviction and in confidence in himself that like you believe him, and you should, and that is contagious. I mean, it is just contagious, and there's no one that I've ever encountered that thinks that way. And um, I remember from that point forward, I was like, that is how I need to feel about myself. I go, when I say things that when I talk about what I'm going to do, I don't need validation from other people to tell me that it's a good idea. If I believe it's a good idea and I'm going to put in the same amount of work into that concept that I do in everything else, like it will end well. It always does. Um, and, I originally had this concept that, so one of the things Khaled was saying to me is, sometimes you need to do, you know, job A to support the dream, right? So you got to do it to support the dream. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to quit your day job and go all in on your dream. Like that's not viable. It's not financially viable, and certainly not for me. And so he was right. And then, like, to me, the conflict was, how do I deal with being in my mind, having this professional persona that I believe means something, and a professional reputation where people know me as a real estate and construction expert, and then also publicly advertise that I'm making rap music. Like how do those go together, and people have like actually take me seriously, because it sounds ridiculous. And I'm very fortunate to have a great group of friends, and I respect all of my friends as, humans and family people, and also as professionals. And when they started listening to what I was doing and the concept, they're like, dude, put it out there. They're like, just put it out there. Like it's gonna get respect. And that's what I did. And I started with comedy. The first couple things I put out were a little bit more comedic, because I think comedy and funny is like a softer landing. It's like a softer entry into a space, because you're not really taking yourself that seriously, and everyone likes to laugh. But it was produced very well. So I did some covers. I did like a cover of a Jack Harlow song, and then I did a cover of like a Nicki Minaj song. And then the third one was like an all original. It was still funny, but I had people from my industry that I'd done deals with, or like former clients, that were like, man, I love what you're doing. Like, keep doing it. I wish I could do something like that. Because I think in many ways have been used to viewing themselves in like this box of like what the industry is. Right. And there was just a respect that I got from putting myself out there and putting the work in to produce something at a high level that's so lateral from what people are expecting. And in doing that, I kind of merged the two. I remember I got a call from HR, because now we have this big company that I work for. And actually, no, it was uh, our head of business development in the LA office. And she's like, I just got a call from this client of ours, and he saw your video and was like showing it around the office and saying like, can you believe this guy works for this company, and they have this guy who's a rapper. And I was like, cool. I was like, I know that guy is, right? That guy's an asshole. I've seen that guy drunk. He doesn't take care of himself. He slanders other people. He's disrespectful to his own staff. And that's not a person whose opinion that I value. So if you choose to value his opinion over my professional credentials, my history of success, and the quality of what that that rap song and that rap video were, right, then I'm happy to have a discussion with you. But if I were in and I said this to her, I go, if I were in like a local shitty cover band, and I was like covering Journey songs at a bar on a Thursday night in Ohio, would you have a problem with it? And like, it was dead silent. I go, so the fact that it's good, people find it entertaining, and it's got some kind of virality to it, and it's making its rounds, you're upset that it's good? I was like, tell me what the conflict is. And she was like, never mind, forget I said anything. And so, like, when I started doubling down on myself and doing both very well, like, that's really when I got the juices flowing.
So before this, I was listening to you on another podcast. It was like some kind of real estate. You were the guest on it, and the guy,
Sun, Sand, and Sold. Was that
yes,
it? Yeah, yeah.
since then it's sold, and the one guy kind of was making fun of you a little bit for it to your,
But yeah,
you know what I'm talking. He was,
of
and then it
course.
got kind of, the vibe kind of changed after that from him a little.
From
Did you?
him, because I think the concept of what I'm doing is ludicrous, right? It's crazy. Um, but to see it done the way I'm doing it, like I'm not talking about hoes and I'm not talking about money or cars. I'm also not doing church music or religious music. Like I'm talking about very relatable things, and they're generally pretty positive, but they're also like very introspective. And it's super honest, and like I like hip hop's a medium that I like, so I choose to use that. So in many ways, it's a journal, right? Or it's messaging. So music is the vehicle, and like clearly it's not what anybody's expecting. So I think that if you say to someone, like if someone said to me, and I didn't know them particularly well, or only knew them in a certain professional light, someone said to me like, "Hey, I'm making a rap album," I'll be like, probably not the best idea. Maybe invest your time doing something else. And I got a lot of that, from people who didn't know me very well. And no different than you doing the podcast. It's like, if you refuse to give up on it, and you know that you're not going to release something until it's good, and you know what good is, like it'll get respect. And that's what's happened and what's happening. And so my goal with all of it is to merge the music with the education, with just the positive messaging of being a good husband, being a good dad, being a good role model in society, and also being very transparent with the conflicts that happen, um, in these different life stages that we have. Because I listen to a bunch of music, and I listen to Drake. Like I can't relate to Drake. The guy's too rich. Like I don't identify with most of the things he's talking about. The melody's good. I've got respect for like Kendrick Lamar, just go to the other side of it, right? The guy's he's a poet. His stuff is incredible. Also, just doesn't really speak to me and kind of where I come from. I think there's a lot of people out there who are working in the world in these jobs they don't feel fulfilled in, or they've had some relationships that haven't really gone very well, or they are going well, and they're questioning who they are and what they're supposed to do with themselves and with life, because there's just so much media coming at them, and it creates this conflict. I don't think there's a lot of stuff coming out that's talking about that in a positive way, in like a positive, not corny way.
Yeah.
So my goal is to merge all of it.
Cool, man. Well, it's you're doing what you want to do. So, I mean, good for you. Like that's what
Mm.
your career's in right now. So,
Yeah.
why do
It's,
you? And I want to let you run because I know
I've
you
got
have
some
to
time
go.
if you want to keep it going, by the way.
All right, all right.
So
I wanted to
don't feel
ask you.
rushed.
All right, cool. Thanks. So I wanted to ask you, like, why do you think? Because you said that you feel like there's people that might be in unfulfilled jobs or things like that, and I'm just curious why you think that is, or why they don't maybe put themselves out there a little bit more, that type of thing, or pursue what they want to go after.
Yeah, I mean, there's no absolute answer, right? I think there's also a lot of people out there who are fulfilled in their jobs, right? But for those that aren't, I think it happens for a number of reasons. And I don't think it's like this cultural phenomenon. You know, I think you get so good, no different than sports, and no different than what I said before. Like you get so good at something, and you're comfortable being good at this one thing, and it's a lot of effort to disrupt and create change. And you feel like, or you fear that you wouldn't make the same or more money if you went into something completely different, and oftentimes that's true. So I feel like there's this overwhelming feeling of complacency that just kind of settles in, and then the job becomes the job. And that's actually okay, in many regards. I feel like it's okay to not be very ambitious. I think that people probably sleep better at night that aren't extremely ambitious. And people that are complacent and satisfied have less anxiety, right? Probably live more in the moment and enjoy certain things, or their perception of what enjoyment is, um, you know, might be so different where they, maybe, it's almost like a red pill, blue pill sort of discussion, right? Like they don't understand how things actually work, or they don't care to know, and that's all right, and they're just very okay with their life the way it is. Or they get their validation through their family life, or they coach a softball team, or they're on a softball team, or they're in a bowling league, and the validation comes from there. And I don't think like what I'm doing is necessarily right. It's just how I'm choosing to go about things. I think that that lifestyle might be okay for some people as well. But I do believe that there is, for people that are ambitious and people that are or have been high performers, like you said, like with athletes, everyone has an athletic clock, and it's just a matter of when it runs out. Everyone's got a clock on their ability to be able to do things, like whatever those things are. And the older you get, and I found this out and I'm finding out, the older you get and the more responsibilities you take on, the more time it takes and the less time you have for creative pursuits or passionate pursuits. Um, and it's a risk to take some of those things on, and it's a sacrifice in so many different ways. And I believe that like one of the greatest crimes you can commit against your own humanity is not pursuing things that interest you, and looking back on your deathbed and being like, man, I wish I had done that thing this way. Like I had an opportunity, the window was there, and I chose to go the other way because I thought it was going to be too hard, or I thought it was going to be received the wrong way, or it was too risky, or I was nervous about the outcome, or I didn't believe in myself. Like you can rationalize all you want about these things, and whatever helps you sleep at night now. But I promise you, those same stories will haunt you on your deathbed. And I'm pretty adamant about that. So that's kind of how I'm living right now. My window's getting smaller, you know?
Yeah, dude. I love that. I love that. It's so true. But how often do you actually keep that top of mind, right? It's gonna you just one day turns to the next, and then then the weekend comes, and then you do the same
So
thing.
I gotta tell you, so yeah, or not. Like or not, because I like what's always helped me is some people keep things close to the vest, and I respect that. I have a friend who literally doesn't mutter a word about what he does, and like he kind of operates in silence and does very well. um I almost do the opposite. I just tell everyone I'm doing something, oftentimes when it's just an idea. I'm like, I'm doing this thing, and that creates a pressure because I'm a man of my word, and I have to live up to at least my word. And so I create the inertia before something really exists, so I have to kind of live up to these things. I like creating the pressure for myself. And I think that if you don't put those things out there and don't put those thoughts out there, and the only thing that actually exists in the world around you is the safe thing, then it's very easy for one day to just go to the next and settle into the weekend and do it all over again on Monday. um, and no different than in athletics, when I talked about, I believed I was perceived as this high level baseball player and this athlete, and that's how I got respect. I felt an obligation to live up to it. So if I believe that people see me as someone who does very different, collaborative, creative things, like I released the last music video I released, people are like, when are you doing the next one? When are you doing the next one? Like, I got pressure on me to put something out now. Otherwise you're just a guy who did one thing and it was cute and then just decided not to do it again. So I really enjoy that pressure. And I think, like, even for you, like, tell people you got a fucking podcast. Tell people like you're really pursuing this thing. Tell people you want some big names on it. Like, put it out there. Create some pressure for yourself. And it also creates energy, and people want to help. People want to be involved in creative pursuits because many of them aren't pursuing their own creative dreams. And they'll want to help you.
Yeah, dude. You really want me to show up on the top of Google when you type in the post game podcast?
I do. I don't like, that's not what I'm pushing right now. Like, I
I
want to be
know.
buried
Yeah,
in the
man.
SEO, man.
Yeah. No, dude, I appreciate that, and that's what I'm doing. Yeah, I say that I haven't been doing that, but I've definitely been doing a lot more of that, because of exactly what you just said. I'm like, I try to keep that more top of mind. It's like, dude, the window time is weird. Yeah, it goes really slow, but it also goes extremely fast. So, what and we'll wrap up here. How is being a dad change your perspective?
Being a dad has changed my perspective on everything. I also it immediately takes you out of the me first mentality. And some people say legacy, and that's not really my thing. But I do believe that it's important to understand how your children are going to perceive you. And I think the relationship that you have with your parents is fundamental to how you grow up and how you develop. It creates, in many ways, your worldview. And I look at it as a tremendous, I wouldn't say it's a pressure. I would say, although it is, but I'd say first and foremost, it's an opportunity to just craft that worldview for my kids. And that kids, right? It was my daughter, now it's my daughter, my son. And I think that there's something that I really want them to just be aware of in terms of how the world works is you can actually do whatever you want if you're willing to put in the work. Like it's the American dream, but you can do it if you're willing to put in the work. I can tell you many things that I have not accomplished are because I have not put in the work, and I'm never going to put in the work. But the things that I have accomplished or achieved or created or products that are out there are because I chose to focus and put in the work for these things. And I really do wish that I recognized that earlier. I thought, like, you talk about music and entertainment, I didn't think that was a viable career. I didn't understand how that whole industry worked, and it works like anything else. And I really want to demonstrate that you don't need to get stuck into something. There's some decision that you made when you were younger if your mind changes. No different than we talked about people being stuck in careers after years and years, right? Like it's okay to pivot. It's very okay to pivot. And so, like, if my daughter is into, making this up, let's say she's into gymnastics, and for 4 or 5 years, and then one day comes to me and says, I do not want to do gymnastics. It's just not for me. It's not fulfilling. I'd rather choose, to focus my energy on this. Like, I will allow her to make a decision like that, right? Like, she's gonna have to think it through, and we're gonna have to do a whole analysis, and like, clearly don't want to create a culture of quitting things. But um, I don't. I think that the fear of changing direction is something that a lot of people live with, and I don't want my children to live with that. And I also want them to see that their father, made a choice to go against the grain and do something risky and create artifacts that are going to be there forever. Like, they'll probably be implanted in their brains in a microchip. My music videos and events and whatever.
Yep.
But they're going to be there, and they can remember their father for these experiences that he's created.
I love it, man. It's I feel like that's a decent place to leave off. Yet it's true that people are afraid to pivot because of what is it, the sunken costs, right? You're like, all right, I've already spent so much time doing this. So
Yeah,
why I can't try a new career, can't try whatever it is. So yeah, that's interesting and something good that you're instilling in your kids, man. That's awesome.
yeah,
I'm not a
yeah,
dad yet, so I can't really speak to it, but I I can appreciate it.
yeah. Good.
Um,
Oh, sorry about that. Of
Jonathan, cool, man. Thank you for doing this. I'm glad that we
course, man. Thanks for
connected,
reaching
man.
out.
Yes, sir. Real quick, just social media.
Yeah,
I know you're pretty active on it, so why don't you give that a quick plug if people want to check out some of the raps and
sure.
whatnot.
Yeah, it's at John Weislow. JONWILO. Wilo's my rap name or hip hop music name.
Is that what that is? I was wondering what that was.
Wilo. So actually, funny story. So we had an equipment manager on the baseball team at University of Miami. He's still there. Amazing guy. His name is GM Robert GM McDaniel, and he's been with the team like 30 years. And he has a speech impediment, and so it's not ill intentioned. But when I first came to the team, he called me Wilo, Wilo, and so everybody called me Wilo because that's how he said my name. And then I was always the guy who was like rapping at the parties and in the locker room and stuff, and so everyone just called me Wilo as like my rap name. So that's what it is.
There you go. All right. Shout out to that manager. Still kicking it, Miami.
He's the best.
That's crazy.
He's the best.
Cool, man. All right. Enjoyed this, man. Thanks again.
All right. I appreciate you, man.